This is the CNC Geekcast, the podcast where two guys with speech impediments talk about movies. I'm Joseph Collins.
And I'm Paul Combs.
And on today's episode, we'll be talking about Mad Max Fury Road, Paul's favorite action movie, and one of the best action movies of all time. We're going to be talking about the characters, the plot, the action, what makes this movie so special, and even tack on a discussion about the Black and Chrome edition. So stay tuned! Paul, stop banging your head, it's distracting.
I actually can't help it. The soundtrack for this film is just incredible.
It is, and I love that one character in this film where we have this car that has pretty much a music stage, and this guitarist is hanging from something, and then he just plays his guitar the entire time. He's like, what, the war?
He's called the Doof Warrior.
The Doof Warrior. Oh, yeah, the Doof Warrior. That's funny.
I can't blame it, though. If I was an evil warlord dictator guy, I would want a slave tasked with playing the guitar and following me around.
Yes, it also had drums, too, like those big war drums. So, I mean...
It's completely impractical. If I was an evil warlord dictator, I would be like, okay,
yeah.
do it.
But at the same time, if you can describe this movie in one image, how would you do it? This shot right here.
I would use that shot, and I would also use the sandstorm shot. Do you know the shot I'm talking about?
Of course I do. That was a great shot.
The shot where they're going into the sandstorm. The movie does a wide shot there, and you see Furiosa's caravan being followed by Immortan Joe's caravan. That shot alone tells the story. Mm-hmm. No dialogue is needed. Just that pullback, you understand exactly what's going on.
And that's going to be a lovely day.
Exactly.
So, but let's get into the plot very quickly, shall we? But before we do, to let you guys know, if you haven't seen this movie, spoilers ahead.
But also, if you haven't seen this movie, I really have to ask you what you've been doing with your life.
Wow, Paul, you really love this movie, don't you?
No, I do. If you love action films, there is literally no chance you will not like this film.
As a matter of fact, some people object to the fact that this movie doesn't really have a plot, but before we get into that, what is this plot?
Well, the plot is incredibly simple. Mm-hmm. The plot is, before the movie even starts, Furiosa has this plan to smuggle Immortan Joe's wives out. Because they're living in this patriarchal society. They're what's known as normal. They have no deformities. They're used to breed future warlords.
They're also considered to be very beautiful. And the movie does make sure to, from a visual standpoint, get that through to the audience because they're all dressed in white, signifying purity and signifying, affection. And they also have chastity belts on them to keep guys away from them. They themselves are definitely enslaved, and of course Furiosa, being a woman, wants to get them out. And so she's tasked at the beginning of the movie to get some gasoline for the warlord, and she veers off to a different direction, and that's how the movie gets started.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of what I love about it. Yeah, this movie is called Mad Max. It's named after Max. But in all honesty, he's just a bystander.
Well, I think when you look at the other Mad Max films, he's the same thing in all those too. I mean, he really is in the center in the first two films. It's really about the universe and what's taking place within that moment. I mean, I know we have a lot of objections. People are saying this movie doesn't have a plot. My response to that is simply, that's based on a false premise because it's making the argument that a small plot equals no plot. And this is not true. A small plot equals a small plot. Or a simple one, we should say.
Yeah, this movie is an incredibly simple movie. This movie is literally one giant car chase.
Yes. It's an awesome car chase.
No, it is the best car chase ever put to film.
It is.
But that is all this movie is.
And there is some points of pause, which I do appreciate. The director really and the writers knew the importance of action overload. And how, even though that has great action, we gotta give the audience some breathing room here.
It's like after the sandstorm scene, which you've already talked about. Mm-hmm. There's the sandstorm, and they drive in, and everything happens. And after that, the movie even's like, okay, we know you need a break to even catch your breath. Yeah. So it just cuts to black, and you see them wake up in the sand.
Yeah, and that's where Mad Max comes across all the wives.
Yeah, that's where Mad Max comes across the wives, and then the action gets started right up again. Because instantly Max gets into the fight with Furiosa, and...
Yeah, but it's more like that. The one that's an action sequence, it's just thrown in, though, just to keep the pace going. But at the same time, it stops. It reestablishes characters and helps us see what Mad Max's original intention is and see him actually change his mind, whether he's forced to or because he just grew conscious at that moment in time or saw it was in his best interest. But there are some actions that is just small.
I want to go back to what you said. You were saying a lot of people say this movie doesn't have a plot. Mm-hmm. First off, I'm going to say I don't know if these people watched the same movie I did. Like, this movie was called Mad Max Fury Road. If you watched a different movie, you need to get on watching this movie.
Yeah.
But also... What I loved about this movie was how it did away with unnecessary exposition. I'm going to use an example of this.
Okay.
Well, in the opening scene after Max is captured, you see the tattoo on his body. That tattoo says Universal Donor. So we instantly understand why Nux, the war boy, takes him, why his blood is so valuable.
Yeah, because we got captured, they were tattooing that on his back, and that's the opening sequence of this film.
And also, later in the film, Furiosa gets stabbed, and she needs an instant blood transfusion. Instantly, we know where that's going to go. Max.
Yeah.
Because we remember he's a universal donor.
Yeah.
Just because the movie doesn't have these unnecessary exposition, we still understand it, and we can still piece it together. That's my favorite thing about this movie.
Yeah, plots don't have to be overcomplicated in order a movie to have a plot. I mean, the plot is, like we said, the MacGuffin is just something to move the plot going to basically, what's the point of the character's motivation? It's the MacGuffin. And the MacGuffin here was to get all these wives to this Greenland that Furiosa's character grew up in. That's a MacGuffin. And then when in the movie, when they realized that Greenland didn't exist anymore, the new MacGuffin was going back and conquering the patriotic system. Would that be an accurate description? The MacGuffin changed, or
I think the MacGuffin itself would be just safety. Them wanting it away from him.
All right.
Okay. Because the only reason to go to the Green Place was they knew it was a civilization where Furiosa thought she would be protected.
That's where she was born from.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's what I understand it to be, the MacGuffin, as you like to say.
The plot is simple, but that's what makes it so good. Because it's simple, you can focus on one of the most important aspects of a movie, and that is the characters. And what are your thoughts on them?
Well, the characters are memorable. There's Max, there's Furiosa, there's Nux, the war boy that gets with him. Even the wives have their discerning characteristics. I'm not only saying that because I've seen the movie like 20 times.
Oh, already?
Probably more.
But no, I do agree with that. And like we said, Max usually is just along for the ride, pun not intended, in this one.
I mean, he did get sucked up. He is along for the ride, so to speak. But once he meets and once he understands what's at stake, he still does the right thing, showing he has that conscience, showing he has that sense of justice.
And that's the thing I really liked about this movie was when he first met everybody and, the 4-5 riots and Furiosa, all he wanted was water. He just wanted to get away because he had a mace mask at that point that he was put on him, and then he was hooked up to a war boy. What was that?
You're right. It's a war boy.
But the thing is, he was hooked up that wire, the cord.
He was chained.
Chained with that blood.
Yeah, the blood transfusion needle, I guess you would say.
Yeah, that cord, whatever it's called. It's escaping me. But no, all he wanted was to get off of it, and he was willing to take the war rig and drive away. He was willing to do that. I like that because it reinforces how dangerous this world is and how you really need to put aside sometimes your conscience to survive. I don't like the idea, but it does a good job reinforcing that.
No, it really does. And that's what I love is how much of this world is explained with so little need for unnecessary exposition.
You can tell the character's motivation just through visual. I mean, the actors do a very good job because there's a lot of shots of just seeing expression and seeing just reaction. And Furiosa's character, I think, is a really good character because you could tell that even though she's, warned or war-warned, she still is like, look, I'm a woman. I don't like to see my fellow women being harmed. I gotta get them out, and I'm the only one who's capable of doing that. And she's the only one who has that heart. I mean, if you live in a patriarchal system and everybody is forced to bow to this one guy, it's like, and you're the only one who can get them out. I like that aspect of her character.
And I like how long she had been there, too, because she had done some awful things. You can see it on her face at certain points in the film. The fact that she's missing a hand. It's obvious she's been on the wrong side of the fight way too many times.
Well, at the same time, she had, like I said, she really had no choice. And then she kind of suddenly came up with a plan, and she went with it. And
and even Nux. Nux is a great character, too. Like, he knows he's dying. But he just wants his life to mean something. He thinks dying for Immortan Joe would give his life meaning. He'd be awaited in Valhalla. Because he knows he's dying regardless.
War boys are kind of trained to be kamikazes. They're trained for war. And their entire mentality and mindset is to propel them for death. And they're also pushed to lavish in the glory of war. That's the entire purpose and meaning. It's like, go out there, fight. And there's actually one thing I found interesting. It's like this one guy, they were being chased by a rival clan. Well, not rival clan, but another clan. And this one war boy knew that he got shot in a harpoon. He knew he was about to die, so he took these two explosive sticks, jumped onto the car, and before he did, he said to the Hello War Boys, "Witness me!" And he jumps in. The entire War Boy in the movie made this line a big deal, and that was important. And that's another thing I love about this movie is it's one of those, goes back to what he's saying, mention, will mind, and payoff, right? Mm-hmm. And that line was a mention, but that was an important line. And that's the thing I like about this film is it doesn't have that many throwaway lines. That line wasn't just there for atmosphere. There was a purpose for it. And that you hear that or see that later on in the film, which gave that moment a lot bigger impact.
No, it did, because witness me comes down to I'm dying. Witness my life having meaning. I'm doing this to...
Yeah, witness my action. Witness what I'm about to do. And of course the War Boys made a big deal out of it. But I love Knox's character because it gave us a... insight to the psyche of the War Boys. It was like Finn in episode 7 and looking at it through the eyes of a stormtrooper. His character was important because we saw it through the eyes of a war boy and what his entire philosophy was and coming to the realization because at one point he was like, I'm going to stop this for my war master, and he was, I guess, Joe was his name again?
Immortan Joe.
Immortan Joe was seen as a god. If he looked at the War Boy Pacific Ray, they're like, he saw me, he looked at me, and he messed up at one point. Joined Furiosa and the group later on, and he was really upset at the time. And I think that was a great moment because he came to the realization that it was not as simple as he was taught.
Exactly. It wasn't as black and white as he was taught. Because he realized that I failed in Immortan Joe, so now I can have no purpose. Now my life is meaningless.
Exactly. And then he realized...
So now he was able to find meaning.
Yeah, and he found it. There's another favorite part I love about this movie is he found it because one of the wives, who was a redhead, saw him like hiding on the war rig, and I had compassion for him. I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Knox was laying down, and the redhead lay down next to her, and they just had an honest conversation, like any couple would have. And I love that moment because they are trying to escape a patriarchal system. It was a messed up system with them because they were basically raped in this film, and it was a great moment because it shows the true relationship of how a couple can interact, the way that you do it, you talk, you listen, he was listening, he was talking, he was showing his feelings, he was listening, and I thought it was a great moment in that regard.
No, it was a great moment, and it was able to build character so much. And it even didn't just build character, it built the universe, because at that point, that's when you understand Nux literally has cancer on his neck.
Yeah.
The same with all the War Boys. All the War Boys are dying. And you understand that at that point in the film. You understand why they're so crazy. You understand how Immortan Joe could brainwash them so easily.
Yeah, they're dying, so might as well go out in a blaze of glory.
That's why when people say this movie's not deep, I really don't understand what they're talking about.
No, this movie is definitely deep. Being dyslexic, I could understand a lot of the visuals in this film. Because there's one scene where Max shot one of the wives who was pregnant was going to go for the war rig and just was walking to, I guess, drive it or something, and Max shoot her leg. And at this point in time, the way these women are presented was pure and perfect in beauty and in figure and everything. And this one shot of this woman's leg is now got a gun gaze. And it's bleeding, which suddenly signifies her perfection is now damaged. She's stained. Those are the type of visuals that is throughout this entire movie.
Yeah, this movie is great in the concept known as visual storytelling, where it doesn't tell you what you need to know, or it shows you.
Yeah, and that's really the point, because it is a visual film, and the dialogue is there, but you have to be able to see it most of the time.
I mean, truthfully, in all honesty, I could see this film working with no dialogue, and just the score turned up really, really high.
Yeah, I mean, you could possibly just look at it from a visual standpoint, because I remember being dyslexic, I was reading the Bernstein Bear books, and they had a lot of dialogue, and I just read the stories from the pictures in the book, and the same thing here. And that's another thing I think that makes this movie so great is the visuals. Because, like you said, that sandstorm shot where they're driving in the sandstorm, and even in the sandstorm, that was just incredible.
Everything about this film is incredible. Getting back to the action is what makes this film.
The point was to make an action film. We talked about this in John Wick 1 and 2, that action films have gone downhill in the last couple of years, or last couple of decades. It hasn't been interesting, it hasn't been fun, and a lot of times the action, I can't follow.
In an action film, it shouldn't be hard to believe, but the most important part is the action.
Yeah, and you should be able to see the action, but I can't see the action in movies like Taken, or, movies, I can't think of another example of it. Resident Evil 7.
Or any of the Resident Evil movies.
Yeah, I want to see the action. But you can see the action in this one, but yet it still uses some shaky cam. What makes this movie different than Taken or Resident Evil?
The problems with Taken and Resident Evil is they use a lot of quick cuts. They go the easy way out. They have a million cameras on set. That way they can catch the action from every angle, and they cut it to make it look like things are happening, things are more intense than they are.
And they shaky cam.
And the shaky cam. I mean, shaky cam isn't bad in and of itself.
No.
The most important thing with any action, though, is you have to understand where the protagonist is, what he's doing, and where the antagonist is in that scene.
You also have to, in this film, there's a technique that's used called a film.
It's called eye trace.
Eye trace. And the entire idea is you keep the entire action centered view.
Well, you don't keep it centered necessarily.
Okay.
You keep it easy to follow. Because if your eyes are having to dart all over the screen, first off, it's just going to be boring and confusing.
Yeah. In other words, you need a point of reference to focus on.
Yeah.
You may have one shot of a character's face, and then it switches to him grabbing something. The place your eyes should focus on is the center of the shot.
And George Miller is a master of this, because this movie, had it been done wrong, had it been done in a Taken style, it would have been an incoherent mess, and instead of calling it the best action film of all time, we would have been calling it one of the worst.
Yeah, and it also goes back to one of the main rules of editing, is that you only cut if you have to.
The main rule of my opinion is making movies. I'm not a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I'm not going to claim to be. But the main rule I want to stand by when making movies is think like an audience member.
Okay.
Like a director. A director could watch that incoherent mess in Taken, and they could be like, oh, this is what I was going for. This is what was going on in this shot. I mean, of course, he's the director. He's going to know what he was going for. I'm not the one directing the film. I need to be able to follow everything easily without questioning what's going on. The more time I'm spent questioning, the less time spent enjoying your film.
Yeah, I hate to go back to it, but Suicide Squad is a perfect example of editing-wise, about how poorly I was edited. And I hate to use that example, but it's the most recent and fresh example. Same thing with Batman vs. Superman. I mean, if your film is edited poorly and those shots are not consistent, then the audience is going to get confused. We're going to know what's up and what's not. You said this in a recent episode. The editing should almost be seamless. But if the shots are filmed the right way and then edited the right way, you get the results that we have in Mad Max Fury Road, because you can follow the action. There was one shot where the Warwick was being chased by a motorcyclist, and you could tell where over every motorcyclist was. You have motorcycle 1 coming in, and he jumps over the rig dropping a bomb, and then in the same shot, motorcycle 2 comes in and goes across the screen, and then the Warwick comes across the scene, and the camera just pans across it. This goes back to the rule of only cut when you have to. Because if you keep on cutting things, it's really jogging for the audience member.
It definitely is. And that's another thing I love about the action in this film. Like, the cars they use in this film are incredible. And the stunts they do in this film are incredibly dangerous, but they look so cool. The fact that George Miller built most of these cars and they had actual stunt people doing all these stunts is just mind-blowing.
Definitely the case. And I mean, everything just, it's a perfect storm of so many things done right when it comes to film. The music is perfect, and the music, of course, spills that emotion. And then you have the explosions and the scenery, your world building. And going back to the idea of this movie is not deep, this movie has a lot of good shots. Furiosa actually got to where she thought the Greenland was. She met fellow women, and she was told, oh, you passed that, because it's one scene they went over a swamp with trees. That was the Greenland.
Yeah, it turned into a bog. I guess the ground itself had gotten rotten from the universe that they was inhabiting. Inhabitants of the Green Place had to move on. Some of them got left behind, as you can see in a previous shot. They're walking on stilts, and truthfully, it's just really creepy.
It is, and there was one scene where she realizes what happened. She walks out in the desert, and she screams, but you don't hear the scream. You just see her screaming up in the sky.
And the best part about that scene, too, is the choice that was made. Because remember what's the background of that scene? Mm-hmm. It's all sand. It's all monochromatic. Mm-hmm. So it makes her face pop. You can, see the heartbreak.
That is what makes film so great, is these visuals. It's deep. It really is, because it's, like I said, the scene that I was talking about is like when the Knox, the war boy, decided to go back and to overthrow the patriarchal system. So they all jumped on Immortan Joe. After they killed him, they jumped on his car. Well, Knox was the only one left driving. So he said to the redhead, go over, I'll be there soon. Well, one of the main bad guys, the muscle, jumps on. He's still alive. He pulls the engine off, and Knox knew that he was going to die either way. So he knew he had to sacrifice himself. But before he did, the line that the War Boys said was, "Witness me," before they kill themselves. Well, the scene where Knox and the Redhead talked and had a genuine moment, he said to her before he died, "Witness me." But not in the same context. Be proud of me, witness me, see what I'm about to do for you. That's what makes this film so deep.
And it also comes down to witness me. The reason they say witness me is like the fact that that's when their life has meaning.
Yes.
Like they're war boys. Their life doesn't have meaning until they can die in battle. Mm-hmm. That's him like, my life has meaning now.
But he's not dying about it, he's dying for her.
Yeah, exactly.
And dying for the family he has. And that's one more thing that gives this movie so good when it comes to deep. So that's why this movie is deep. Moments like that.
You know something else about this movie that's actually kind of amazing once you learn it?
What?
This movie didn't really have a traditional script.
Oh, why? How so?
George Miller did pretty much 90% of this movie were like storyboards. He knew the vision he wanted to do. Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron got mad at him on set. But once they saw the film in the premiere, they admitted they were wrong.
Very little dialogue?
Well, I think it was just they didn't know what his vision exactly was.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, you gotta tell the actors the vision.
I think that's more what it was. It's just one of the behind the scenes stories.
Yeah,
I remember hearing.
Okay, well then next, I think it would be a good thing to do. And you saw this, and I saw this in a lot of behind the scene features. Well, for example, for The Hobbit, the scene where Galadriel and Gandalf and the White Council was talking, they did a kind of rehearsal before it, and they mapped it out before they did it, and they said that was really vital, important for us to do something like that. And you hear stories of those sorts in behind the set, so maybe the best thing to do was have them actually in the meeting while the director is telling his vision.
I mean, I don't know, but the fact that it came out so great, even in those circumstances, is just mind-blowing.
But I do understand their frustration. If you can convey that to your actors, they'll be on board with it. Just let them know what's going on.
Yeah.
I think it's just a good rule of thumb for any future director. Learn how to communicate properly, not only to your set guys, to your team, but also to your actors. Let them know what your vision is, so they understand what they can do to accomplish that vision.
One other thing. Did you ever get a chance to see the black and chrome edition of this film?
No, I have not. What about you?
Actually, I did. I bought it specifically because George Miller was talking about how he thought the black and chrome edition was the definitive edition of his film.
Why is that?
Well, he wanted to shy away from a lot of the action movie tropes, where like the color scheme, where it's kind of muted and everything. That's why this movie has such vibrant colors. Mm-hmm. The studio wouldn't let him do the black and white edition in theaters. So he was like, okay, I'm going to go all the way to the other direction. So he turned the saturation up to 100. And that's why every color in this movie pops so much. But I got curious about it. Hearing that he considered the black and chrome edition the definitive edition. So I got curious and I actually bought it.
Okay, and how was it?
I can see what he was going for. Because in the black and white edition, in most movies, they use color to create contrast. In a black and white edition, you can't do that. You have to use light. And he does a very good job of that in this film. Mm-hmm. I think the fact that I saw the color edition first made the black and white edition not pop as much to me, but it was still a great film. And there were some scenes that worked better in black and white. Like even the Furiosa scene, the scene we was talking about that we love so much, it was absolutely amazing in black and white. And so was the sandstorm scene. See, because everything was so monochromatic. Mm-hmm. And the use of shadows. A couple of scenes alone make the black and chrome edition worth the price of admission.
It's just an alternate way of watching.
Yeah, it's just an alternate way. The main reason I brought that up is because did you know they're doing a black and white edition of Logan?
Oh yeah, I did know that. Yes.
Yeah, I think they're going to do a one-day theater release or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's going to be on DVD when it finally makes it out. So I think it would be good to see in black and white too. Because again, there were so many scenes where the shadows and everything was so prominent. I think it would work well in black and white.
Like I said, I think it's just another way to watch it. Because for the longest time, the cheapest way to make a movie back then was black and white. Because the technology wasn't as advanced. You had just the classic movies like, Citizens Kane and, the Boutique Falcon and all those films that were black and white. Even though the color camera was around, it wasn't expensive. And so, yeah, back then they had to find a way to create contrast. But once color came in, it just changed the way that movies were made. And I don't want to say that one is better than the other. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. And you get to see that when you actually experience one between the other.
I think it just comes down to, I like black and white. I do. I love black and white films. Because the amount of time a director has to spend thinking about how to position the camera, how to do the lighting and everything, I kind of love that. The fact that they know how to get the most out of every single scene. Mm-hmm. And because they're having to use the light itself to create contrast. They can't just rely on the color. Like with in Vertigo, with the way Jimmy was wearing the red and Kim Novak was wearing the green. They can't do anything like that in a black and white.
Yeah.
They had to find a different way to do it.
Now, by the same time, without color, you would not be able to promote the idea of envy or the idea of passion or the idea of...
I mean, there's benefits to each.
Yeah.
But I always like when movies I love, I kind of always like to watch all the editions of.
Oh yeah, me too. I the same thing with extended editions. I just recently watched Alien 3, the Assemble Cut, and I'd like to do an episode on that. And the same thing about Batman vs Superman. I love to see extended editions simply because I wanted to see what ideas were tossed around. I love to see deleted scenes as well because I wanted to see the ideas. Even if the ideas didn't work, I wanted to see what they were going with, if it actually fit. And it's also just a great study case. Like, okay, I can see why it didn't work, so I know what to look for if I decide to make my own film.
Do you ever plan on making your own film?
I don't know if I'm planning on, but other people who are listening may. I mean, there may be one future filmmaker in the audience. So
that's actually really cool to think about.
It is, isn't it?
As long as it's not another Zack Snyder.
Yes, learn from his mistakes. Make good characters. Get good writers. Stop doing this other thing that he's doing.
Get hiring bad editors. Or working with bad editors.
I don't know if it's bad editors at the problem. Is the studio coming in and chopping it up?
I don't know. I don't want to talk about... I could rant on Zack Snyder for days. Y'all all know that.
Yeah.
You know that. Our audience knows that.
I don't think it's all Zack Snyder because Suicide Squad was terrible and Zack Snyder had nothing to do with that.
I still blame him. I don't know. Like any bad movie, I just yell at Zack Snyder.
Is that a Zack Snyder or Michael Bay?
Just every bad movie, it's like, curse you, Zack Snyder.
Curse you, Michael Bay. Had nothing to do with it. Still curse you. Yeah, so I really do enjoy watching all these editions. But unfortunately, as much as we love this film, we gotta go.
We do. Though, truthfully, I could talk about Mad Max Fury Road all night. If you ever just want to talk to me on Messenger and be like, hey, what did you think about Mad Max Fury Road? I would talk to you about it all night.
Yeah, you probably create a 3, 4, 5 paragraphs of why you love the film.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, we have to go. But before we do, as I mentioned, I recently saw Alien 3, the Assemble Cut. And the reason why is because I bought the Creology edition, like all 4 films on Blu-ray, in anticipation for our next episode, which is going to be done on Alien Covenant, which is coming out May 19th.
Yeah, I'm excited to get another film in the Alien franchise. I love the Alien franchise, even though Prometheus wasn't that great.
Yeah, it wasn't that good, but I'm really excited about this film because an alien is actually going to show up.
Animal looks like a return to its horror roots, and I just love that.
Oh yeah, we'll see what happens. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Actually, I'm wanting to talk about our new project a little bit more.
Yes, that.
Yeah, it's called Podtron Podcast Network. Mm-hmm. We're a member of the 10 other great pop culture podcasts. There's the Video Rangers, This Was Rad. There's so many great podcasts with it. And we got a lot of great network-wide things coming. We're going to start having promotions on our show, showcasing these other great podcasts. We got our website up and running. That's at podtron.wordpress.com. We're on Twitter at Podtron Network. We're on Facebook at Podtron Network.
We're moving up in the podcast world, aren't we, Paul?
No, we are, and it's just exciting that this is a labor of love. Because this is something I've said before, but talking about this movie is kind of the perfect way to talk about this. Mad Max Fury Road is the reason I'm even doing a podcast. So it's poetic that I'm talking about this movie and we're growing.
Yeah, it is. And we would like to thank you, the audience, for tuning in and listening to us every single week. We appreciate it, and I hope you have enjoyed us, and we're not going to stop anytime soon.
No, we're not. This has been one of the most rewarding experiences.
Oh, definitely, and especially when we're just joining a network, so it wouldn't be, it wouldn't fit for us, would it?
No.
No. But, like I said, we got to go, but it was a fun conversation. But in the meantime, I'm Joseph Collins.
And I'm Paul Combs.
And you've been listening to the CNC Geekcast.